And I think we're live as far as I can tell. Hey Cam, this is the pre-show.
What's going on? Did you
What?
break out that California mug just for me?
Oh, actually, no. I always have that
Oh,
California mug because California is always on my mind.
oh,
I miss it a lot. It's been the longest stretch in my life of not having
it's
gone to
gorgeous
California.
down here right now. I've been
I
on my motorcycle every day.
I notice because I look at your videos and I'm like, it's gorgeous down there. I
Yeah,
should I
it's
should be there.
insane. Yeah.
Well, and if if I'm lucky, I'll at least head to NAB and then I can like be nearby.
Yeah.
Maybe
It's in
swing
Vegas,
by.
right?
Yeah.
I
So
never go to any of
close, not
those.
quite, but you've never been?
No.
You're on Twitter, right? I forget when I talked to you.
Yeah, but
No,
not
you're not.
really.
Not really. Okay.
Bro, I'm
Maybe
a
I'll just.
hermit.
I don't know. You're good at stories.
I'm
All right.
annoying on stories.
No, you're good.
I
I like
should be
them.
on Twitter, huh?
I mean, it's the Twitter is the chat room for all of YouTube, basically. It's like
Hmm.
I don't know. It's where all the conversations happen. It's not. It's where it's where I book most people for the show, for example, right? Like where I just kind
Hmm.
of can get where I know I can get a hold of people.
Huh. I know Twitter was still a thing, honestly.
Yeah, it's a huge thing.
I'm
Um,
selfish with my social media. Like on Instagram, I post
you
and then I
know,
dip out.
that is, I have a lot of respect for that, and I should be doing. I've been doing more of that actually. I've been like, I make sure all of my notifications are off. I make sure I'm not following anybody that stresses me out.
Yeah, yeah. I have a lot of
I'm
people
being
on
much,
mute.
yeah, yeah. I've become a lot more selective about the like amount of social media that is in my life. All right. Anybody watching us just bullshitting for a sec? This is just a warm up, so I can post all of this to social, and I just did. So now, there might be a dozen people that can join us. And if you don't know what's going on, we're basically recording the podcast. So the real show is about to start in a minute or two. Wait, is it actually is your video actually vertical, or is it
Uh,
like cropping it?
it came up vertical.
That's interesting. Why is it vertical? What if I full
When I
screen
opened
you?
it up, it was automatically vertical.
That is so. Are there any buttons you can click in the app? Because I think I might right now. It seems like I might only get a vertical thing from you, which wouldn't actually be a big deal, I guess. If you can't figure it out in 30 seconds, I'm not going to stress about it.
I'm not seeing anything. No. What are settings? Output volume. No.
Nothing. All right. No worries.
That's weird. Sorry, I'm useless when it comes to live stuff. This is my first podcast, by the way.
Holy wow! I feel honored. Where's my
Yeah.
focus? All right. Well, it's been a long time coming. So, okay. Here's the real beginning. I got Cam McKay here, who I've been hoping to chat with for a long time. I feel like as soon as I saw your channel, I was like, I know this guy, even though I didn't, because it just seems like there's a lot of overlap in our lives. We use similar cameras, we
Mm-hmm.
shoot similar subjects sometimes,
Yep.
but you live in a much warmer climate than I do, so you
Uh
have a lot
huh.
more opportunity to do
I'm a little
it.
more spoiled where I'm at.
Well, for anybody that doesn't already watch Cam's content, I mean, your YouTube channel is great, where you sort of, I feel like you've got a very different energy to a lot of YouTube, where you're just sort of walking people through what you're doing. It's like, you got a new camera, here's your experience with it. You just had a great photo shoot, here's what it was like to be there. It's less of like trying to play the YouTube game. It's more just sharing, like just like kind of
Yeah.
uh, sharing your experiences. But the reason I fell in love with it at first, again, this is you should just go look at his Instagram right away and have a better idea. But you shoot like just such beautiful like Western cowboy, California stuff that I love. And we're up here in Alberta, which is very different, but has a very deep cowboy heritage culture. So and obviously my wife is absolutely in love with it. So yeah, I don't know. I've always loved your work.
Thank you. Yeah, my whole like approach to YouTube is I'm a super just honest, chill person. So I know people, when they go on YouTube, they have like the whole host side to them.
Yeah.
I can't do that. I can't do
I
it
never
at
do that.
all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
Like people will try to direct me to do it sometimes because I'll hire like homies who like are in the YouTube space too to like come shoot BTS. And I'm like, no, I
Hmm.
can't. I'm sorry. Like,
You're
I'll
like, amp
try
it
and it's
up.
just, yeah, I just can't. It's just I'm just
No,
me.
I like that.
But yeah, but yeah,
Well,
California. Dude. I have so where I grew up is I just recently moved to LA. Before this, I was about 30 minutes from Palm Springs.
right.
So hence all the Western stuff. I grew up like in a little country town. So that's where all that stems from. But I'm honestly trying to get out of that a little bit because it's become trendy. Westerns become trendy for sure.
Well, it seems like this is your moment then. This is when you're going to be
Well, it's
in the
becoming
highest
like
demand of your career. Too
in
trendy.
LA, it's oversaturated now. Like every photographer is trying to shoot like Western stuff now. They're putting girls in
Right.
cowboy hats and cowgirl boots and putting them half naked, which isn't really my vibe. So I'm just trying to focus on doing other stuff in the meantime. And when it
Yeah.
dies back out, yeah. I'm still shooting
Well,
cowboy stuff though.
the other thing we have in common that I wanted to bring you on for is to just talk about like aesthetics because a lot of people that are doing tutorials or showing you how to use a camera or software or whatever, you see the results and you're like, well, I mean, you went through a process that is helpful to me, but your results aren't exactly what, my aesthetic. And I look at your work and I'm like, well, you're doing tests, you're using software, and the results are coming out in a way that meets my aesthetic in a lot of ways, right? And I guess I want to go through that on a few different levels. Like I'd love to talk about how you think about cameras, like what's important to you in a camera, how do you approach it in software afterwards, like what's color grading like for you, what are what's the mix of elements that come together to make a beautiful image in your eye? Because
Hmm.
I think you're nailing it, and I like that you share it because this is always the curse of like learning through YouTube is a lot of the best of the best in any creative field don't end up becoming teachers because like they end up getting so much work creating stuff that they don't share it. They don't find the time to share what they're doing. So I super appreciate that you make time to show us how you're
Yeah.
doing it.
I mean, first, your aesthetic too. There's multiple times when you post stuff, I screenshot it and I save it for
This
later. And I'm just
this
like,
is
I'm
the
gonna steal
complement each
this.
other segment of the
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, the whole like one of the main things is like the colors, the way because you know how to combine. I don't even know what the colorway is called, but it's that like specific like yellow or orange with like a certain kind of teal and a red or something like you obviously know what I'm talking about, but
Sure,
you
yeah.
nail that perfectly. When most people are just kind of doing like the typical teal and orange kind of thing, instead of chasing the aesthetic of that whole vibe. So that's why I've always loved your work. And I even follow your wife too, just because I'm like, I know it's all your work and it's like, it's insanely clean and everything. So I don't know how you guys shoot all that plus like YouTube stuff.
I think it was funny because like you guys probably followed each other first, or before I knew of you anyway. Because I was like, I saw one of your YouTube videos and I showed Anya. I'm like, Anya, you got to check this out. Like, it's this amazing cowboy stuff. And she's like, oh yeah, I know. I've been following
Oh,
him for a while.
that's sick.
Um,
Well, so when it comes to, we'll just start off with like, I don't know, you want to start with camera stuff?
let's start with cameras. Yeah, sure. So like, what are you shooting right now most of the time? And also for anybody listening, we're talking about both photo and video. That's another thing we have in common that you seem to care about both just as much, which I try to do as well.
Yeah. Well, real quick for you, what do you favor?
Video. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard for photo to keep my attention in the same way right now, and I think the big reason is because video is so much harder. It's so much deeper, and it takes so many more years to master it. Not that I've mastered anything really, but like to really get your head around it. It's so much more difficult with video. So I think that's why it excites me more, is because it's more clear how much I have to learn.
So the challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how I am. But it's kind of, I mean, that's how it used to be. Now it's kind of whatever I'm getting booked for the most. Uh, like my YouTube stuff tends to be the other thing of it. It's like right now I'm doing a lot of photo stuff just because past 2 years I probably shot 3 photo campaigns and the rest is all video work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I've been having like going with the photo side. But yeah, I shoot with the Canon R5 right now, And anyone that's been following my YouTube for the past few years know I've tried every camera because I was waiting for Canon to update their mirrorless cameras. And so in the meantime, I was trying everything. So I got a lot of followers through just like doing reviews on cameras and stuff. And I also got a lot of haters because, people take it so personal if you don't like a certain camera. Um, but yeah, I'm shooting with the Canon R5 right now. Freaking love it. I was excited to get the R5C, but my excitement died down a little bit.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Tell me
Mostly
about that.
because it's just because of the world, all the stuff going on.
Oh, so
Um,
your general excitement died down for
yeah, yeah, for
yeah.
gear and just
You're not
everything in
alone.
general right now. But I also shoot a lot of film. And I'm starting to get more comments on my Instagram saying that people can't figure out if my shots are digital or film now, which has always been the goal.
Yeah, that's a high compliment.
And I always tell people like the only way to achieve that is to shoot a shit ton of film. Like the more film you shoot, the more you train your eye to get that look. And then that's why I like the Canon because I've done tests before. I've done a video on it on comparing the R5 to Portra, Kodak Portra, and they're actually like super similar, especially the contrast. I don't know what Canon does, but the skins tones kind of like pop off the camera and separate themselves from the ambient tones. That's all the geeky stuff, but so yeah, just the R5 just makes my life easier. I don't have to do crazy masking or anything like that. My edits are pretty simple now.
Well, where does most of the actual edit happen for you? Like when colors are being modified and changed, is that happening in like actually I guess which software? I was about to say Lightroom or Capture One, but I don't know which one you're using. And then or do you do more of it in Photoshop? Like where do you really sculpt it?
Mostly in Capture One. I don't touch Lightroom anymore. After using Capture One for like, I don't know, like 3 years, every time I go to Lightroom, I feel like it's like crayons versus like computer.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know the feeling, and but I keep going back and forth. Like anybody that's listened to the show a lot knows that I've been switching what my primary is because there's things I just love about each of them so much that I've had a hard time really committing. Capture One is just objectively better with color in every way. Like it's 100%. It's much easier to get a good starting point, and you can take it further, and you can get more refined with it. I keep using Lightroom for a lot of things because of the way that it manages databases and kind of
Mm,
and keeps your photos organized. It's possible that Capture One has as much potential with it, but I've had a much harder time finding guides and people's like recommended workflows that really work for me in the same scalability of like, look, I shoot huge volumes every photo shoot has a few thousand images. How do you keep that in a way that you can manage over years? And I
yeah.
found that way easier in Lightroom. So I keep going back and forth between them because of that. But
I mean, I do all that manually. Like I import, like I drag and drop straight from the SD card into folders on external drives usually. Um, that's the one thing I used to not like about Lightroom is like you your library will get messed up somehow or you lose a photo and you're dependent on Lightroom to find it.
right.
When
And you
if
can't
you
find it.
manually do it, it's like it's all in your control. Yeah, Capture One, I agree with you. It's everything's more finite. All your controls are just my results are always way cleaner when I do it in Capture One. I could
Yeah.
get a similar look in Lightroom, but it's not going to look as clean to me. And I'm kind of like anal when it comes to like the final
Well,
deliverable.
and I mean, I've got a video that's been building in me for a while. I just don't think anybody would watch it about there are so many things that really frustrate me that none of them actually, but especially that Photoshop can't do that as I spend more time in Resolve, I'm like, this should be essential. This should be basic everywhere. No app should be without, you know, really powerful, large visualizations of hue saturation tools and hue
Yeah.
versus hue sliders and having vector scopes and having colored
Hmm.
waveforms along with histograms and that you can't do like saturation versus luminance. And I mean, I could just keep listing stuff. There's so
Yeah.
much stuff that you can't touch in Photoshop. Is very minimal, is barely there in Lightroom, and it's there in Capture One, but like you can't reach as deep into it, or I haven't found out how to. But like I don't know. I just feel like photo editing is maybe because it's always been a little bit easier. Like you could just take a raw image, you get something good out of it. So people went less deep learning how to manipulate colors more manually. Whereas on the
Yeah.
video side, it was like nobody was holding your hand. So all these true professionals making Hollywood movies created pipelines that were like, no, we need this to look like film. You know, like our we already have a standard and it's called film, and we're going to find a way to get there. And they have. And I feel like on the photo side, it was like, we're close enough. Like the digital looks fine. All right, let's, you know,
Yeah.
add some blue shadows, good, you know, and move on. And so a lot of people only learned how to use their Lightroom presets and nothing beyond that. So I don't know.
I think the main, because I've always wished that like you could at least edit photos in DaVinci, which I'm sure some people do, but I mean it's not set up to do that, but it'd be freaking
Yeah, it's not
amazing.
optimized at all.
Like even having just like like waveforms and everything inside of Capture One would be so sick. Only because now that I have the new 16-inch MacBook, my black levels are always off, just because the screen's so good, you know, and
Right.
it's showing you more than what normal people are gonna see on like normal phones and just like a standard iPad. Like it's not gonna look
Well,
the same even.
and this also just seems basic to me that I think every time I'm in Photoshop and I'm editing an image of a person, I'm like, wait a minute, remind me, there is no way to check skin tone on, there's no independent, objective way to look at your skin tone.
Yeah.
Really? This is Photoshop. This is the app that every professional in the world uses to do skin retouching, and I can't have any sort of reference point. There's just nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing in there. And that's totally insane because it's such a fundamental element of like every time you grade any video, you keep going back to like, how's my skin doing? Is my skin like, have my eyes started to get confused? And
Yeah.
then same thing, like you're saying with your like black point and your white point, the visualization of the histogram in Photoshop is like a postage stamp, and it
Yeah.
doesn't really get bigger. You can't like blow these things up and make them easy to look at.
Yeah. I mean, the other
It's
thing is too,
crazy to
though,
me.
because for all video log cameras, we all have a standard for log. You can convert it to like ARRI,
Yeah.
or the Cine on what's the one in DaVinci? That's the one I usually use because I use DaVinci's film LUTs, the ones that are just like
Right.
built in. So there's no standard for photo cameras. You just get the raw files and you have to learn how to manipulate those files instead of being able to convert it to a standard.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that's the biggest thing because even when I release LUTs, like I release them specifically for cameras, just because they like I do crazy stuff in curves. Like my main thing that I do is curves. I have this film curve that I made that mimics film, and right now I have one for Fuji and Canon. I don't sell them though, but if you want them, I'll send them over to you if you want to try them. I just don't want to sell them because I like they're so like to me they're like my bread and butter on how I get my
Yeah.
look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So
but
and
I always feel like the first thing that most people are missing in getting that look is knowing what to look for. Because, like I
yeah,
was saying, that idea of people just do orange and teal, right? They'll just here's I'll make a specific example in case anybody's been struggling with this. We all know that there's something appealing about cooler shadows and warmer highlights. It's just so universal in film, whether or not it's the full orange teal look or a traditional film look also has elements of that. It really is everywhere. What people get wrong is a lot of the time they'll grab the black point. And this is also what Lightroom does. If you use the split toning in Lightroom or Photoshop or whatever, it'll take the black and now your pure black starts to become blue or cyan or whatever color you're adding to it. And your white point stops being white. It starts to become yellow or pinky, creamy, you know, whatever color you're
yeah,
adding into it. And this is not right. This is not what should be happening at all. You're always wanting to target like your deep blacks and your, you know, mids where skin lives. And this is like any complexion of skin. It's not like skin tones aren't living at the top of it. Like no, even if you're as pale as I am, they're always like to the middle or towards the bottom. And so like all of those adjustments of the warm and cool need to be like on the bottom half of your curve tone. And a lot of people will be doing the opposite. They'll be doing right at the top and right at the bottom. And that looks terrible.
yeah. I mean, granted, this isn't art, so people can do whatever they want, but it does look
Sure.
terrible. So,
Yeah, it's
but
awful.
I think the biggest thing is when I grade, I don't only do the teal and orange and the shadow things anymore. What I do is I get the ambient blues. This is a big secret that I'm giving away that I do.
That's why
I
I brought you
mean,
on.
yeah, there you go. You got to bleep this part out though. So all the ambient blues in the shot, when you shoot film, film is amazing at getting all the ambient tones and colors in a shot and boosting them up, where digital cameras like to gray them out. So if you're
Mhm.
looking at asphalt, people think on digital, they're like, oh, that should be gray. But if you shoot on film, it's going to be reflecting whatever the ambient tone is. So for everyone, like, next time you're outside and it's sunset, look at the shadows coming from a tree. They'll be blue. They're not black or they're not gray shadows. They're blue
Mhm.
because it's all the ambient sky tone going into there. So when I do in grading, I boost those ambient blues up, and sometimes I'll push them a little bit till. So when I do that, you naturally get that till look, and then you have kind of creative freedom if you want to push the image a little bit more warmer or whatever you want to do from there. But I never ever touch my shadow or my black points anymore
Yeah.
since I've been doing that. And some people will say maybe some of my shots are like too teal and orange looking. And I'm doing zero like grading on the black and shadow points.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to think about it. Like the I again, yeah, it is so much to taste because like I will look at other people's work that I think is great and they have done these things that I'm saying are bad. But in my images, I think maybe because I'm doing a lot of commercial stuff, I always want it to feel clean and realistic. Like nobody's going to look at the image and see that that there's a filter, right? The filter should kind of like fall away into the background, and average non-photographers should give no thought to it at all. If they have any awareness that like, oh, I see the filter, I feel like you're kind of failing. Another element of it that I've become more aware of lately that is specifically a film aspect is that as anything in the scene becomes brighter, it's typically going to be less saturated. This is just, again, this is an attribute of like how film is collecting color. The more saturated objects or colors are all at the towards the bottom. So dark things can have lots of like rich saturation and tones to them. And as they come up higher on the waveform or on the histogram or whatever, just up on the curve, those have less saturation. And if you pump saturation into it, that is a lot of like the video look. And I was noticing this actually, I was watching The Office the other day, and you know, it looks like video. It's meant to, right? It's a documentary.
Yeah.
And you look at all the lights, the lamps in the background, and they're very, you know, they're bright and they're like super orange. They're like popping out at you. And it was reminding me of this, like, yeah, that's not what film looks like. The lamp in the background is going to really like fall off in terms of its saturation. As it gets brighter and brighter, the saturation falls away with it. And if it's darker, that's when you get that like richness. So I don't know. It's something I've been
Yeah.
figuring out lately.
Yeah. That's been something that I've been learning myself lately because I used to love bringing down like right below the highlight point and crushing it and saturating it. But I've been learning when you look at dated looking work, it's usually because your black and white points aren't
Have,
solid.
have you been looking at my work? Is that what you're saying?
And I've been looking at my own work.
Yeah.
If you go like 3 years into my work, and when I'm like doing all these like crazy faded shadows and toning them, they don't date well.
Yeah.
So something I've been doing is again, I'm trying to chase more timeless work. Because I find myself anytime I see a photo that I love, whether it's new or old, it's the colors aren't crazy.
Mhm.
It's more of the, I guess, the contrast and like the simplicity of it. There's no frills to it. There's nothing that can date it to be like, oh, that was like edit during this trend kind of thing. Um, so
Well, and there's this problem that we're limited by the phrasing of that we talk about like filmic colors, which I mean, it's even like what we're saying right now is we're everything we're shooting is well, except for the film, all the digital stuff we're shooting is fully digitally captured, and our reference point is still an older medium. And it's funny to think about because like we're the point of it isn't actually to emulate something physical. That's not, or to me, that's not what is important. It's not that you're looking like something that's faux vintage so that people think that you shot it on an old camera or that it reminds them of the 70s or I think it's more that over time, over a very long time, color scientists at Fuji and Kodak figured out some things about what makes an image look beautiful. And they really got to a pretty great point. And everything just got reset with digital. It was like, no, 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 we're going for technical. Like things need to be accurate in some sort of measurable way, but the priority isn't aesthetics. It's not about like
yeah.
the you know the universal beauty of it. And there's I think there's a lot that was lost at that time. So coming back to it now, we have to start learning about what these elements are so that we're not just relying on some LUT that we downloaded or a preset pack that gives us this look. If you don't like understand it, which I'm always still trying to, you'll always be just downloading anything that says film emulation on it. Whereas
Yeah.
it's more about like, let's figure out what it is about that, what was film doing that made us all like that image.
That's what kind of drives me crazy is there's so many like, this is how you get a filmic look. And then they start doing it and I'm like, no, like that doesn't look like film at all. It drives me crazy. Like I could rant on forever about diffusion filters. And I have videos where I was like, oh, you'll make it look filmic. But every time, like I realize all my
I still haven't
favorite
shot with one
films.
ever.
Really? Oh, don't start. I remember I got yelled at by a client before because when they got the footage, they're like, did you use a diffusion filter? I was like, yeah. They're like, never do that again. So from there, I questioned everything I've ever heard on YouTube about diffusion filters, and then I stopped using them ever since. Because again, every time I watch one of my favorite films, there's no diffusion going on. There's zero diffusion. The only time there's diffusion is if it's like a throwback, like dreamy shot. Then they use it for that reason. But other than that, film, they want it super sharp, like images out of their film. They weren't purposely trying to like make it more mushy, which I get digital looks super sharp. But it doesn't have to if you just turn down your sharpness in post, and then it ends up looking a lot cleaner. Yeah, diffusion filters, yeah, Jeremy, yeah.
Well, and of course there's different arguments to this. Like when you hear Deacons talk about it, like he just wants like the best glass, the newest, sharpest, most accurate, like just show me what was in reality as precisely as you can. And if we want to modify it a little bit, we're going to do that later, but like just give me something pure, which is really against, I think, most of the trends right now. I mean, everybody's all about like anamorphic's never been bigger, which I love. Like I like that look, and vintage lenses and this like dirty capture where things are a little bit broken before they get to you. But you don't need to go down that path to make it look filmic. 'Cause obviously Deakins looks, if anything looks filmic, it's Roger Deakins, and he's
And everyone's obsessed with them. And that's what confused me. You go onto YouTube and it's like, how to get the Roger Deakins look. And then it's like, stack on like a 1/1 black pro mist. And I'm
you've
like,
never seen him do that.
yeah, I'm just like, it drives me crazy. I'm so grumpy when it comes to social media and like YouTube and all that, just because I've been shooting for like 10 years. And so I started before YouTube and like Instagram was like a thing. So I grew up loving like Peter Lindbergh and Alan von Unwerth and all those photographers. And so, yeah, you just see it now. It's like, it's just trend over trend and a lot of repeating stuff where it's like, where is this stuff even coming from? Like who started this? Who made up this? This is how you get this look. Yeah.
Well, or like I said before, when you see the results, you're like, I don't know if that's what I want. And so here's another good example of things I've appreciated that you've dug into more deeply is I always feel like most camera reviews are underestimating the importance of dynamic range. This isn't everybody, but at least half of the people out there will be like, oh, it's 10 stops. And also they're usually like quoting what the manufacturer says. They're like, it has tons of dynamic range. It has 10 stops. It has something that's the same as some other camera that's pretty mediocre. And it's like, this is what always looks like video. Like, fortunately now we're at a point where there's a wide variety of cameras that have a pretty extensive dynamic range, and we're not as desperate for it as we were just a few years ago. But whenever people discount it and they're like that, they'll say, it has 1 or 2 stops less, but that's not a big deal. I mean, to me, having a full stop less of dynamic range always matters. And it's always the thing that frustrates me most about cameras that I otherwise love, but they're missing 1 or 2 stops over some competing camera. You can take the color science, you can take the default color profile of virtually any camera and sync it up with other cameras pretty easily. There's a lot of ways to do it. You can get the tonal response, the contrast, what does red look like? What does blue look like? You can change all that later. But if you don't have enough image captured, if the data is just not there, if it's 8-bit instead of 10-bit or 12, and if the highlights are clipping, the shadows are noisy, you can't do that. It's all gone, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I don't know.
dynamic range, because a lot of the stuff I shoot, like the run and gun stuff, we can't set up lights. We don't always get to choose when and
Yeah.
where we're shooting it. So dynamic range to me is like the most important. Um, yeah, and the other thing that kind of like you see a lot of people saying, "Oh, it only has this much," and then under the noise floor, and they're like, "Well, you don't like using noise reduction, right?"
Do I? I
Yeah,
never use it. I just like don't.
yeah,
It's
that
not even
blows
an
my
option to
mind.
me. I don't think about it.
That blows my mind.
Yeah.
Even like on the R5, I'll expose for highlights. And then in post, I bring the shadows up in post. And yeah, they're noisy, but I run like a simple noise reduction on it. And it
Right.
looks so clean. And you get like an extra 2 stops than what
Yeah.
most people are saying you could get out of it.
Yeah. Are you doing that with C-Log 3, or are you doing that with like RAW and C-Log 2, or
C-Log 3. But if you do in
okay.
C-Log or in RAW, it looks even better just because with RAW, you have even, it opens up those details.
Yeah.
So I did a video on that and it probably gives you like another stop and a half in the shadows.
Hmm.
But I mean, that matters. That's why I love shooting on my Komodo
Right.
because I could stretch that thing like crazy. I use the HDR wheels now a lot. And I'll bring up like right above the black point and in between like the mids and the shadows right there. And I bring those up just enough to bring details out. I don't want it to look like HDR, obviously. But the Komodo's like you could stretch that footage like
That's,
super
I
crazy.
mean, that's why I still want one. Okay, so this actually leads me into I've made some really exciting discoveries lately. I've been watching so many hours of Resolve tutorials. I think I mentioned in the last episode, Cullen Kelly, especially his stuff's been really great. But so one big thing I've always been searching for and couldn't find is that in Resolve or in Photoshop, there's limited ways to really like affect your exposure and your white balance in a similar way to what the camera would do internally. Um, and I think a lot of people seem to just ignore that. Like I don't know why. No, why is nobody talking about this? But they'll grab like the offset wheel, move it up and down, and they'll be like, yeah, it's changing the exposure. It's making it brighter and darker. But what an offset wheel is doing, it's the exact same as if you grab like the white point and black point and just move them all together at the same time. The whole image, the whole either histogram, waveform, whatever, is just moving up and down as one, meaning there's no awareness of what highlights or shadows should look like. In Resolve, the HDR slider wheels that you're talking about that I've just been starting to really dig into, they work pretty great out of the box because they're going to pinch the shadows and the highlights in the same way that changing exposure in camera does. But what's amazing and that I'm just in love with is if you set up a color managed workflow in Resolve so that Resolve understands the camera that you're working with, and it's like, oh, this is C-Log 2. I know what to do. This is V-Log from Panasonic. This is uh, uh, Alexa's log C, whatever it is. It understands it, and it's like, okay, I know how to deal with this. And your all of a sudden your exposure adjustments look like your camera. So there's this like very smooth movement across your highlights, and you can raise the exposure 1 or 2 stops and nothing's clipping. It's getting creamier. And it's not because you've done anything, nothing, you've got the same footage. You're working with the same stuff you had a minute ago, but that slider understands what exposure is and knows the log profile that you're working with. And I've just been incredibly happy with that. And same story with the white balance slider. If you just make things warmer or cooler, it's not the same as changing the white balance. But all of a sudden that temperature adjustment does the correct thing within Resolve. Anyway, these are all reasons that I've been hating or having a hard time not switching out of Final Cut lately,
Yeah.
because the tools in Resolve are just amazing. Is that what you cut in as well? Like you editing in
Yeah.
Resolve? Yeah.
Yeah. Which I remember when I first got into DaVinci, I was like, does anyone use this for like actual cutting? But now that I use it, like I will never switch to anything else.
Yeah.
Like it's just so, especially with the color grading. Yeah, because I used to like do, the qualifier. I
Mhm.
should go to the luminance part of the qualifier, and I would do 2 nodes. One node was just for shadows, the other was just for highlights, and I would lift those and crush those. So that's basically what the HDR wheels are now.
Mhm.
So going back to what we're saying, like why does none of the photo editing apps have any of these tools? Like we have our highlight and all
Yeah.
that thing, but you can't control what parts of the highlights it's bringing down.
Yeah. No, and even inside of like if you're inside of Photoshop, there's an exposure slider that you would think would adjust exposure, but it's just crazy. Like I don't even know what it's doing. Maybe I got to like
Yeah.
look up some, but it just clips everything right away.
Yeah.
And it's just so bizarre. I mean, some things do get it right. So all the camera raw tools in Adobe are doing the right thing, right? Like if you open up a camera raw adjustment, it's got the same sliders as Lightroom does. That exposure slider does the right thing. Even on like a PSD, it's smarter about it. It's
Yeah.
I don't know, but you're always going to get for anybody who hasn't discovered this, like raw will give you radically different results if you move the white balance and the exposure slider using the same tools, using the raw tools. If the image is raw versus a TIFF, even if it's like a 12-bit TIFF, it's going to look completely different in raw and do a much better job. So stick to
Yeah.
those. But
I still want more control.
well, so
Like I would love if Capture One gave me like illuminates levels to choose from that
yeah,
all of them that all the highlights and shadows worked with. So I don't use the white and or the lights and shadows bars anymore. I just use the whites and black points because it's way more subtle. Like
right.
I try not to push it at all anymore. I just try to go for the most natural looking thing. Even though the
Well,
results I guess don't look that natural.
another thing I like in Capture One a lot is the ability to like stack those adjustments as well. So for example, sometimes you want to do levels that are only hitting your white and black point, right? So the line stays straight, still got a linear curve that's just one diagonal line, but you've moved to white and the black point. And then you might want to do another one that is adjusting your like mid-tone contrast. That's an S curve that's targeting the mids, but you could stack another one on top of that. Is like, okay, but now I need to like, scoop my highlights in a certain way.
Yeah.
So there are always reasons to do more than one thing. And if you can't layer them, which you can't in Lightroom, it's super limiting.
Yeah. Well, actually I lied. The Capture One you can do luminance mask on new
Right. I never
layers.
do that, but
Yeah, I never did that
yeah,
either.
yeah.
But yeah.
But okay, let's also go back a step to like a bit of your like your sort of workflow right now. So you said you're shooting photos on the R5 primarily. Do you still shoot video on it at all, or is it you're kind of
Yeah, a
all
lot.
Komodo?
The past 3 video gigs I did, I didn't even take the Komodo out of laziness.
Well, yeah. So how do you choose? Because I've been wanting the Komodo ever since I tested it. I went with C70 instead, and I've always been very jealous looking at your footage. How do you end up leaving the house with the R5 instead?
It's kind of comes down to what the usage is going to be. If it's just for like an Instagram post and it's not like a super important kind of thing, I'll just take the R5. Also, if like we're gonna be like hardcore run and gunning, I just want to have autofocus. Even on my Komodo, when I take the Komodo, I just use all RF glass.
Mm.
Every Cine lens I try, I'm just like, I don't need a Cine lens, which people think it's crazy. Like all my buddies who shoot video, think I'm crazy for using RF glass for video. But on the Komodo, even the focus by wire, it does it by distance. It doesn't do it by speed like it usually does. And on the R5, you could switch it to distance too. Um, but
Wait,
yeah,
I don't know what you mean by that. What do you mean distance versus
so
speed?
focus by wire usually, like when it first came out, you would try to focus, and depending on the speed that you would focus by, it would be totally different. So you could try to focus one point this slow, and then do it fast, and it's
Oh,
gonna be totally erratic. Like it's not gonna do the same thing. So
okay.
Canon gives you an option to make it by distance. So it's
I
like a
haven't looked at
regular
that.
lens almost, but you just don't have hard stops,
Okay, okay.
which to me is like whatever. I don't use focus motors or anything like that because I'm usually
Mhm.
just have a hand on the handle and one on the lens to focus. I just keep it simple.
But do you feel like that's like a limitation of the type of gigs you get? Like, would you, if you could have somebody on on wireless focus all day that's just watching a monitor and you're just running around doing your thing and they are just being your autofocus and they're good at it, would you rather that?
No, for most of the stuff I do, it's just easier if I do it.
Right.
Because there's
So
been
you're
times
manual.
where
Wait, what are
yeah,
you doing on the? Are you manually focusing on the Komodo then?
I'll use autofocus sometimes too, and it's great.
Cool. Yeah.
So like
Yeah. I mean,
if
I've
it's
been
a
using it for a
fashion
while, so
thing, yeah, and like if you're getting a wide shot and they're not moving crazy, I'll do autofocus on the Komodo. If I'm getting detail shots, I'm zooming all the way in, autofocus. And it just locks on it and it's face detection, so it could be like a black jacket and it'll still focus on it. But then for any of like my high energy, like running, chasing models and all that, that's all manual focus, and all mostly on RF glass.
Yeah.
I don't have an issue with it. But yeah, so for any bigger gig, it's like say if I'm getting paid like 10K plus at minimum, I'm taking the Komodo. And then the
Right.
R5, I'll either have on a gimbal, which is rare if I use a gimbal, or it's just on my hip with the 7 to 200. So for like punching stuff, or if I can't get close to the subject or something like that.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah. I
Komodo
mean,
has
what
ultra wide.
I've really appreciated it when I'm using it in conjunction with the C70, being able to I mean, basically use the sensor stabilization for a certain kind of handheld shot where I'm like, I don't want a gimbal, I don't want a tripod, I need to move a little bit. And it is good enough to me that like, if you're not, if you're using a decent lens, you can just like hold it and walk carefully and it's going to look pretty good. You can't like, not a walk and talk kind of thing, but basic side to side, just like a little bit of movement works out really
Yeah.
nicely with that stabilization. If it needs to be a little more settled, where obviously sometimes run and gun, you don't need any, but
Yeah. Well, you can't use any, like for a lot of the running high energy stuff, if I used IBIS on that, it would ruin every single shot. And there would be
right, yeah,
no
because
way
you're
to
actually
fix
like
it.
running, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
I'm not
Like,
usually running.
oh yeah, I'm always like, Miles are always shocked. So I'm like, yeah, run. I mean, run faster.
It's because
but
you work harder than I do, man.
yeah. um, But yeah, it like IBIS, like with the R5C, everyone's complaining about IBIS. And even for like my steady shots, if I'm at 200 millimeters, the
Hmm.
IBIS still ruins shots. It'll jump
Sure.
randomly. So I'd rather just not have it at all. Like I love lens IS. I think that's like the smoothest, most natural looking physical stabilization that we have right now.
Yeah. Well, I still barely have any of it because I'm almost entirely on EF still.
Oh,
I haven't
really?
bought any, I don't use any RF glass. I have one lens and it doesn't come out. Um,
Crazy.
but I love it. And so most of that is because of the C70. It's because it's got the full frame once you've got the adapter on. I've
Oh
screwed my
yeah.
adapter in so it never comes off. And I mean, last year I bought 3 EF lenses and I'm still not buying RF. So, um,
Crazy.
yeah, and same with stills. Like so, and sometimes I'm really giving something up. So, for example, with stills, my main lens is the EF 24 to 70, and it is not as sharp as the RF. Like it's a
Yeah.
worse lens for sure.
Especially at
But
70, it's
yeah,
softer.
yeah, and it really drops down a lot of light as you zoom in.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I've just like being able to move back and forth between them has been great. I just haven't like felt the pressure to upgrade. And for video, I'm usually using Sigma as well. So like
Mm.
my standard that's usually on the C70 is the 24 to 35 2.0. Um, and that's just it's good for so many things. So often there's not even Canon lenses on my
Oh,
C70
crazy. I didn't know that. Why do you use Sigma, not the Canon lenses?
because it's sharper because it's EF
Uh,
and it's super sharp and um yeah, I guess that's it. Because
yeah,
like I could get similar quality out of RF glass, but then I can't be full frame on the C70. None of
yeah.
the EF Canon lenses are as sharp. So because Sigma was basically ahead of the curve. They were the ones that first raised the bar of our expectations of like, oh, here's what sharp can mean on full frame.
Yeah.
Because I think we had been living with something that was not actually that sharp for a lot of years. And we're like, this is what it
And we
looks like,
thought it was
right? It's
sharp. Yeah.
fine. Yeah. And then we get some 50 megapixel sensors and we're like, oh, that's what sharp is.
hmm
And so, yeah, I find most of the Sigma glass still totally holds up really well. Um,
Crazy. I hate adapting. I hate speed boosters. Like, I'm
yeah.
just like the most simple. I'm like, just put the lens straight on the body, give me a handle, a little monitor, and let's
Yeah, I
go.
know what you mean. I know what you mean. I'd prefer that if it gave me everything I wanted, but it doesn't. But you're also
Yeah.
living with because of that on your Komodo, you have to kind of live with Super 35 all the time too, right? So now your RF stuff is always cropped, which
Yeah.
obviously your work still comes out great. It doesn't, really sacrifice it that much, but I have a hard time with it. I don't know.
Well, I absolutely love the Tokina 11 to 20 millimeter.
I've heard good things and I've seen good things.
I'm
Yeah.
obsessed with, so that lens is usually glued onto my Komodo. Just today I was at the cafe editing Komodo footage, and it was like the first time I looked at Komodo footage again in the past like couple months,
Hmm.
from like an actual gig. So again, I've been doing most of the R5 stuff, and I was like, shit, like this footage looks insane. And what's crazy is like it has such a good contrast without you having to make the blacks blacks and the whites whites. Like it has, for me, it has enough of that. Like again, I'm stretching it too. Though I'm lifting shadows and
Sure.
I'm kind of crushing the highlights a little bit, and it has enough of a high dynamic range look to where I'm happy with. But I do want the Raptor because it does have another stop or two at dynamic range. So
I would
just like
love
you, I'm obsessed with
the Raptor.
more, the better.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, well, and this is something I was talking about on Twitter the other day. Actually, was that a huge advantage of Red? Let's just talk about Red. Let's ignore Alexa because the price point is quite different from
yeah,
even Red. Red compared to Sony, Canon, Panasonic, everybody else that's making great cameras that a lot of us more in the YouTube market are going to be shooting with. Red gives you a pipeline to guarantee beautiful colors if you have no idea what you're doing. You know, you just
yeah,
like follow the directions, just click the boxes the way Red tells you to, and it looks like it's money. You know, it
yeah,
looks expensive out of the box. If you're shooting on Canon, you go download their technical transform LUTs, even though you're in C-Log 2, which has it looks very similar to Alexa's Log C. The transform looks like garbage. Like it looks like
yeah.
cheap video, you know. So the solutions you're provided by the manufacturer don't give you what you were promised. You don't get something cinematic, and you've got to go so much deeper and either find somebody that's, you know, selling a transform that looks nice, or some kind of third party software that gives you something filmic, or you have to start to really learn your software. That's best case
Yeah.
scenario is you start to dive deeper. But I actually don't think that should be if you want to primarily be a cinematographer, you shouldn't be forced to do a super deep dive just to get pleasing images out of it. Because photographers
Yeah.
aren't, that's not expected of them. You go buy a Phase One or Hasselblad and you plug it into Capture One and it just looks good. You don't need to,
Yeah.
you know, learn a ton. So Red's got that dialed in a way that nobody else does, except maybe actually Blackmagic gets pretty close.
Yeah.
I've never shot a Blackmagic camera myself, but the out of box colors are really really good.
I
Have you?
started with Blackmagic, the
Okay.
Pocket 4K.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved that camera. The footage edits in DaVinci like butter. Like
Hmm.
you could put noise
Yeah.
reduction and everything on it, and it would still run like butter. And the little highlight recovery tab that they have is like, it's like magic. Like it's,
Yeah.
I don't know what it does, but it brings all these details back. Um, yeah, I absolutely love those cameras. I would get another one, but it's just the bodies. There was multiple
Yeah.
times
Working with it.
where
Yeah.
they would just crash out on me. The last time I was in Montana, we are shooting these guys running through mountains and through freezing cold rivers, and it's snowing on us. And the camera just crapped out on me. It just stopped working halfway through the trip. So I put it away, unplugged everything, replugged like several times. Finally, it turned back on,
Hmm.
and then that was the last time I used it. And then from there, what did I get from there?
Yeah.
Oh, I
That's
got the
what.
Z Cam, which was great, but the footage is kind of limited.
Yeah.
Don't come
Yeah.
after
I
me,
saw your test of
Zcam
that.
fanboys. Yeah. And then I got the C70, and the C70 was far superior to the Zcam. I got a lot of hate for that too. And now I'm on Komodo,
You
and
know,
I don't plan on
C70
leaving it.
is still killing it. Like I'm there's always times I wish I had a Komodo for just because I think mostly because of what I was saying. It's just super easy to get it looking perfect, but it's just such a workhorse. C70 has gotten so much done so easily for me.
Yeah,
But the reason I wouldn't go Black Magic even now, I mean, because there's a lot of really affordable ones. Like it can be a good just B cam to throw in the back of, you know, just have it around. The thing that's kept me away from it is the dynamic range, which it's good. At one point, not that long ago, it was like the best you could get for the money would have the most dynamic range. But now it's visibly less. Like it has a good maybe two stops less than something like a C70, maybe three.
yeah.
Like the highlights are not there in the same way. They roll off nicely. Resolve knows how to deal with the footage and make it look beautiful, but it's still not capturing as much data. And that was enough
That's
for me not to choose it.
that's when I start doing that trick on recovering
No,
shadows
right.
and putting
Yeah.
noise reduction on it. It's crazy because you recover the shadows, and you're like, oh, there's a lot of details, but it's super noisy, and there's all this red noise, both on Blackmagic and on Komodo raw footage. You slap noise reduction on it, all of a sudden you have all this color and saturation detail to play with in the shadows. It's weird.
Yeah. I'm
And
gonna
so
try it. I
that's
promise.
usually what I do is I do noise reduction and then I do recovery. And then after that, I do my transform nodes and all that. And then from there, like you could stretch it all over the place. It's insane.
Mhm.
So I was doing that with the Black Magic and I was getting crazy. Again, don't be scared of noise, bro. Just
I
put
mean,
that
I'm not
noise
that
reduction
scared. Do you,
on and
I was watching some tests the other day. Have you ever messed around with how YouTube deals with, like, say, digital grain or film grain simulations or anything like that? Because, like, there's a lot of times where I'll add it on my end. I'm like, this looks better, just like 50%, a little bit of fake grain there looks sharper. Everything looks better. But I know how YouTube deals with things. Like at 1080, especially, it runs like a noise reduction. So
yeah.
the same video, you'll watch it in 4K, you can see the noise, it looks crispy, and then you watch it in 1080, and now it's less sharp because it did noise reduction on that grain. So
Yeah.
how do you approach it? Do you add any, or?
Dehancer.
Yes.
So I've been using their film grain. So I'll do like my usual film conversion and everything, and then at the end I'll put on Dehancer film grain now.
Hmm.
Um, and they have this new digital like version, so you could like change it from analog to digital. And I had a couple people complain on a video because they're like, "Yo, your grain's like way too strong on this video." But which just goes to show like it shows up on YouTube better. So it's a different algorithm that they're using, I guess.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so I tried turning it down, and it's way more visible on YouTube. It's almost too visible on YouTube. But yeah, I
So,
mean, I
so
never had an issue with
yours
it
to
because I'm
turn
like,
down. Yeah.
if someone wants to see the film grain, like watching in 4K.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
I never had like a
and
big problem with it.
and I think it's worth it for, like, if the shot is also, when you're going for like a filmic look versus a technical look, a lot of it's deciding about what are you showing. So for me, I'll push towards the cinematic for like my B-roll, right? So if I'm showing off a product, if there's a computer in the frame that needs to look beautiful and expensive, a little extra film grain and a little more of that filmic look we've been talking about. That's the moment where I'll push that further. But then when it's a talking head and it's just me and my face, I'll try to keep that a little bit cleaner and a little more like a newscaster, because, like, that's not why you're watching my face, is
Yeah,
to think, if you shouldn't be thinking that's a movie at that moment. So there are reasons to go in both directions.
yeah,
Something you just touched on, I want to talk about a bit more, that because I know people aren't aware of how important the order of operations in building out your transforms from log. When do you apply grain? Where do you do your corrections? People just kind of start doing it because the software doesn't really walk you through it. If you don't know, you don't
yeah.
know, and you don't even realize you don't know. So it took a while for me to figure out. And I saw some responses on Twitter that made me realize how widespread this is. So, like, Rene Ritchie, who he's like massively upgraded his video game in the last few years. Like, he had just started on YouTube and out of the gates was like, I'm going to become an expert in video production, and he has. It's crazy. So he's been
His
uploading a
stuff's
ton.
clean.
Yeah, and he
Yeah,
like, bought the right cameras, learned how to use the software, and we were chatting about it, and so I guess this goes out to him. This is more of a direct response to what he's talking about, is that in Final Cut, it kind of asks you to apply your log transform in the settings, meaning that it's like instantly applied to every single clip. And this makes for really easy editing, because as you're looking at everything, you never see the log image, right? It always looks transformed. It looks like it's, in a Rec 709 space. It looks right. And it works fastest if you apply it there in the settings as well. Unfortunately, your transform should always be almost at the very end of the chain, like somewhere near the end, because that flat log space, like the log profile, that's like your raw image. That's where you have all the room to do the, photometric exposure adjustments I was talking about earlier, where it holds on to the highlights and the shadows in just the right way. That only happens in the log space. So if you've already transformed your image to a full contrasty Rec 709 before you do any of your adjustments, anything else you do to it will start to clip those highlights, lose those shadows. Like, everything's already gone if you're adjusting it afterwards.
The best way I
So
could put it is, sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
I'll just simplify it a little bit. Your 709 is like making a JPEG off a raw photo. So you're
yes,
then editing on top of that JPEG instead of the actual raw photo.
that 100%. Yes, and I think a lot of people hopefully can relate to that. And unfortunately, Final Cut. I mean, you don't have to deal with this. I'm going to complain about Final Cut a lot, even though I love it. It doesn't. It only lets you put it at the beginning of the chain, um, uh, and work perfectly. So you can add effects layers. Final Cut does have a solution for this. You can add LUTs on top of each individual clip, but it doesn't provide a great way then to sync those between multiple clips. So if you, let's say, apply that to all the clips in your timeline, you're like, actually, I wish everything was a little bit warmer. Now you have to go in and like manually delete everything, like click, 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 click to
Oh,
delete that. You can't just say, okay, warm everything up in the same way. And those effects layers are much slower than the settings LUT adjustment, and they're slower than Resolve doing LUT adjustments. Like it Final Cut just treats it different. It thinks of it as like this is a special effect. I need to work harder for some reason to apply the transform here. So the way that you do need to do it to get like optimal output though is that it goes like, well, depending how many steps you're going through. If you're shooting log though, start off with a log image, then you do your adjustments, then you do your transform, then you do a look, meaning something like film emulation, and then around that step, maybe after it, is when you'd apply the grain that you were just talking about. And that order makes such a huge difference. Like don't
yeah.
don't change it. It is the right way to do it.
Yeah.
So
It makes a huge difference. Yeah. I don't know why you're still using Final Cut.
okay, yeah. So I got to explain that too. The biggest thing is it's just it is the I strongly believe it's still the best at actual cutting. Like when you
Hmm.
just have a big stack of footage, like you just have tons of clips you're looking at, it has the most efficient way of reviewing it, selecting the best of it, putting it in a sequence. And it used to be that it was also faster software, which Resolve has caught up with now.
Yeah.
But it's the mental model of like removing the bad stuff and adding the good stuff is really fast in Final Cut.
Hmm.
The mastering in every way is worse though. The color, the audio is not as good. So I'm basically every episode now I'm saying how tempted I am to move to Resolve, but relearning it's a lot. And even once I've relearned it, I do know that it's Resolve doesn't support all the things that I love about doing the edit in Final Cut Pro. So
Yeah. I mean, for me, like DaVinci Resolve, I have my media box, right? Or my media toolbox, whatever it's called. I zoom in. So all the shots are big. From there, let me put my beard down, sorry. From there, you could just take your cursor and scroll over it,
mhm.
and you can see if that's the clip you need.
Yeah,
If it is, I double click it, I do my in and out points, drop it on my timeline. So
well,
from
yeah, that's it.
there,
Once you
when I
find your
start
way,
cutting, yeah, once I
If I
start cutting on
figured
the
it out, I'm
timeline,
sure it'd be
it's
fine.
like minimal. Yeah, I
It's
think
true.
you should do it.
I know I'd figure it out. Okay, well, before we run out of time, I also definitely want to talk about. I want to get your thoughts on the new Macs that are about to come out in a few days. I don't know how much attention you pay to computers, but I got to talk about them. So hopefully you have some opinion on them
Yeah,
too. Did you take a look at the Mac Studio announcements?
yeah. I'm waiting for an iMac to come out with all that in there because I have a
Uh,
BenQ monitor and I
mhm.
loved it until I got the 16-inch MacBook, like the new one, because the screen's freaking perfection. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping they come out with the iMac with the same screen and with that new chip in it. But even the M1 Max, it's like plenty fast enough. I'm assuming the Ultra is like I'll just be able to do like 4K playback with like 20
More
nodes on
noise
it.
reduction.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I'm pretty freaking psyched that that's out. Are you getting the studio,
Well, so I don't know what I'm
the
going to
mini?
get for myself. Hopefully, I'll have a chance to review it, but I haven't
Yeah.
made any decisions about like purchasing for my own use. The like I think the thing that's going to sell like crazy is the monitor. Like the studio display is going to be on a lot of desks real
Are
soon.
you
People are
getting
going to,
that?
yeah. I mean, I'm going to have to get that for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's it's not perfect. There's some weirdness about the pricing, but I've been using the LG panel up until now. Like the LG ultra fine, which a
The
lot of
one they
people have
sell on
huge. Yeah, the
Apple's
Apple.
website, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Apple endorsed one. The actual display, like the panel, is still beautiful. Like every time I look at it, I'm like, this is so good. It looks better than most of my other monitors. The casing around it, like the build of it, it's not great. It's still an LG, right? It's like I've survived with it, and I've had none of the problems that it seemed to be common. A lot of people have had huge issues with it, and I've had absolutely none. So that's lucky for me. But what's inside of the new uh, studio display seems to be very similar to that or what was in the 5K iMacs before. There's a few minor differences, like it's 600 nits instead of 500. And then also, the webcam and the speakers. But it's weird having seems to be more or less like a 7 or 8 year old panel inside of a new $1,500 display, right?
Yeah.
There's not really any. The thing is, if you don't have a monitor, okay, maybe I'll ask you this question. If you didn't have that BenQ, if you had nothing, would you go with the studio display or would you still get a third party?
Most definitely. But the weird part, I haven't even used my BenQ monitor in 2 months. Because
Okay, so you're
I'm so obsessed with the laptop screen
Yeah,
that like I'm just working a little 16-inch instead of my 27-inch monitor.
that's weird.
Yeah, I know.
That
So
says a
I'm
lot. Yeah.
hoping. Yeah, my buddy just got what's the other super expensive Mac
Yeah,
monitor?
the XDR Pro display.
Yeah, and that thing, I'm trying to hold out because I'm hoping maybe they'll come out with something similar to that that's more affordable without I don't know. I'm trying to hold
You
out
might
and
be
see if
waiting a
there's gonna
while.
be another option. I know. I'll probably end up getting the monitor though if the iMac
Well,
takes too long. I'd
so
rather just get the iMac.
what you're saying about the iMac is interesting because I've seen a bunch of debate, especially like I was listening to ATP, one of my go-to Apple podcasts about there was a lot of argument about like, is the 27-inch even something people are going to miss because this sort of replaces it. You can get this monitor and either get the M1 Max version of the Mac Studio, or you could get an M1 Mini and you're going to get, great performance and the monitor. And it's not all in one, but all of the parts are still there. And I, to give a little perspective of like working in creative industries, like every shop that I've worked in where a lot of other people are there, every creative has a 27-inch iMac. 100% of them. It was
Yeah.
a few people would have a Mac Pro maybe, but this is going back for years. Like this is everywhere I've been for the last like 15 years. It's been like this. You get the big iMac because it's just the right balance of price, and then you get the good monitor. There's no computer I've owned more versions of. No, actually, maybe that's not true. Maybe I've owned more MacBook Pros, but like I've had as many MacBook Pros as I have had
Yeah.
27-inch iMacs because they're such a balance of like value and performance. And they are clean on your desk, and that actually does matter because there's a lot of creative jobs, maybe not ours, like doing photo and video, having extra ports, having more flexibility in the box. That's really practical for what we do. But for designers, for anybody that mostly just works in like Illustrator or web design or all sorts of different production that doesn't require so much horsepower, I'd just rather have less shit on my desk, like less
Yeah.
cables and all that. So yeah, I missed the 27-inch already and it's barely gone.
Yeah. There's no way they're not gonna come out with another 27-inch.
That's what they say. We'll see.
There's no
Yeah,
way.
I think it'll come back too. I agree, but I don't know. It's weird to me that I don't think it's going to be right now though. I don't think it's going to be in the next year.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
I was hoping at the end of the year at least, but
well, okay. So here's a question: when I do eventually get my hands on the M1 Ultra, I'm always like double checking. Am I saying the right thing?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. On the fastest M1, what can I do to really push it? Like, assuming you and I do basically the same work, like where do you ever run into the limits of the M1 Max? Because it's not
Okay.
that often for me.
So DaVinci,
Yeah.
do a 4K timeline with 8K footage. Noise reduction, turn it up.
You and your noise
Do
reduction.
do a HDR node. Do a transform to log to a log, and then a 709 LUT. And between that, do some qualifiers, and then some windows, and see if
Right.
it plays it back. If it plays it
Yeah.
back, I'm running out the door to get it.
Actually, yeah. Let's make a bet, like a non-money bet.
Yeah.
Do you think everything you described? Do you think it'll run it smoothly? Would you bet it does or doesn't?
When it first comes out, no, because I don't feel like most software is
Right.
optimized
Yeah.
yet to really tap into the M1 Max.
From what Apple's saying, it's going to, if you wrote your software to be optimized for M1 in general, it will just instantly scale to the Ultra. So if it's hitting its peak performance on the Max, it will have no limits on the Ultra. It'll just be day one, like full blast. So
Well, do you think that our current chips, the M1 Maxes, are fully optimized yet?
well, it depends on the software, right? Does Resolve, is it fully optimized? I mean, I just got such good results out of Resolve. I have a hard time imagining it doing better. Like when I did the comparison to like Premiere, Final Cut, and Resolve, Final Cut and Resolve were just neck and neck. I mean,
Yeah.
it was so fast. I was really impressed. And right now, all the Resolve work I've been doing, because actually I just did my full like back and forth grade from Final Cut to Resolve and back. I had never done that for a client before. And it was just like, it was enough for everything. I did have some playback stutters as I like got deeper into the grade. I've been using Filmbox for my film emulation. I just like, I got
How
it.
is that?
It's super good. It's so nice.
Really?
It's very like simple. It's not like you're going to get a ton of different looks out of it. It's mostly that you're getting that filmic response, like just that curve is there and it's really nice. And the fact that it has really good built-in halation and the grain is pretty good. Actually, maybe it's the halation and the gate weave I feel like are really strong and better than what I've seen from Dehancer, which I haven't used Dehancer, but looking at its halation, it felt a little, I don't know, like they could keep working on it, I guess. And it looked better out of Filmbox to me. So expensive. It looked really
Yeah,
nice.
that's why I haven't tried it yet.
Yeah, I'm probably. I told myself like I'm getting this for that client. I'm spending because it's $124, I think, a quarter. So for like
Yeah.
every 3 months. So I was
Yeah.
like, I'm getting it for this job, and I'll use it for that period. I've already canceled the subscription, so it won't renew unless I feel desperate and all of a sudden I really need it. But
Do you
we'll
want to
see.
try Dehancer?
Yes, I do. I
Okay.
yeah, I've heard good things about it. They
Yeah,
actually
it's great.
they did reach out to me at one point, and they were like, we'll give you a 1 month trial if you do a full review. I'm like,
Oh, weird.
I don't know if I have time for that.
I'm sure
And
you
it's
could have you could have pressed them for sure,
yeah,
because
possibly.
I got a full license to do a review on it,
Cool.
and I love
And
it.
you're
Like
using it
anytime when a
often?
client,
Yeah.
well, anytime a client wants like a hardcore film look, like retro, like soft, I just use Dehancer. But
Yeah.
for any like the higher end stuff, I do it all manually, and then I'll
Well,
finish off with Dehancer or
you're
grain.
you're also in Resolve full time. So for me, I'm
Yeah.
still thinking of Resolve as like I want to because I want to go back. I want to reconstruct my LUT package that I'm like because I sell just like a few of them. Like I have just a couple LUTs, and I'm like I want to rebuild that as like a system that really makes sense and is extremely usable. Because most I went out and I bought every other YouTuber's LUT package, and like they're really bold looks, but they're not constructed in a way that I find versatile, where I can like this is going to work on any footage that I throw on it. It's not going to break it apart, and I want to build something that does that so that in Final Cut I can be getting as good of looks as I'm getting in Resolve, because that's been my frustration. It's part of why I didn't get too caught up in Dehancer, is that I was like, well, this is still only in Resolve. Film
Yeah.
box is only in Resolve, and it's a big ask for me to move from one to the other right now. So I want to work on like a LUT solution that is just totally LUT based that'll give me something similar. Also, anybody's probably talking about is thinking about film convert nitrate right now, which I do have, and is good, but
Yeah.
it's not like it doesn't feel like magic. Like there's some
They
times
were
with
the
like
OGs, you know? So
yes,
they were
yeah,
great. I learned how to like really maximize that software.
mhm.
But then once when Dehancer came out, it like I gotta show you some stuff that I do in it, bro.
Oh, I've seen what you do and it looks
Yeah.
great, so
No, but I gotta
I
show you
believe
stuff
you.
that I don't show other
Okay,
people.
some
All
tricks.
right.
Okay,
Because going back to the
after
beginning, how you said I share everything, I don't share everything. I
oh, there's
share most
still
of like,
something to how your stuff looks
oh yeah,
better.
there's a lot of things I don't share.
All right,
I'll
well,
send them all your way.
yeah, I
Yeah.
can't. We'll have another follow up call sometime.
Yeah.
What? Okay, what else about the? I still want a little more on the Macs before they before,
Yeah.
because this is, I got to get, I'm actually going to have to rush this episode out because I got to, make sure that I get all of my exciting thoughts before they start shipping. Cause like,
Yeah.
I kind of want to I'm like betting on like, what is this going to actually be like the Ultra, going back to that, that was my thing. I was asking you how much it's going to do. Like, I want to know how many people are actually going to be able to use that? How many use cases? Is there any requirement to double in an M1 Max other than like data scientists? Because I'm excited for it, but I'm like, is this just all headroom? Or are there
I
any practical uses that like there's something you can't do right now and you'll start doing it because you have that processor?
yeah, anyone that's shooting 8K, anyone that's shooting raw,
Yeah.
anyone that's doing intensive color grading, like that's going to be just clutch, or large projects.
But do you feel like you'll need that with like Red Raw? I mean, Red Raw performs
Yeah.
so well, right? Like, do
On
you
my
think you'll need
M1
it?
Max, I have to edit on a 1080 timeline when I'm color
Oh,
grading.
oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And on a 1080
Okay.
timeline, it plays back with noise reduction. But once you put film grain on it, it starts stuttering. And then once I
Yeah.
start getting really intensive, all my grades are at least like 15 nodes deep. It starts chugging. I have to put the resolution down. And then eventually, as the project builds, I have to just turn off the color grade for playback. So for
Right.
me,
Yeah.
the Ultra
You
would
could
be
use it. Yeah.
pretty
All
sick.
right.
Yeah.
All
But
right.
I'm not going to get it until all the stuffs. I don't feel like, again, I don't feel like I'm getting the max output of my M1 Max yet.
Could be. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean, I
how much
hope
RAM do
I'm
you have?
right.
Just curious.
I only got the one with 32 because I didn't want to
Okay.
wait. Yeah, I
Sure.
didn't want to customize it, so I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
32.
Well, yeah. So, what I'm hoping actually is that the C70 firmware update comes out with RAW before I have a chance to do to review the Ultra, because I mean, all of a sudden I'm going to be shooting RAW all the time. I mean, yeah. Oh, I keep wanting to talk about it, but there's nothing to say it till it comes out. I am so excited that the C70 is going to have RAW, because all of a sudden I think my craving for the Komodo is going to kind of go away a little bit once I can shoot RAW on this thing.
Do you think the
Too much
raw
fun.
coming off that's going to be as
I think
good
we're
as red raw?
well, no. I mean, the codec I already know is worse. Canon's codecs kind of suck, but the visuals from it, I think it's going to look. I think you're going to be able to match it dead on to a Komodo. I bet, and
Hmm.
it'll still be behind the Raptor. Like the Raptor will still be ahead, but I bet we're going to be able to squeeze that extra little like one stop difference we have right now, and that it'll be like perceptually very close. Not it's not going to be the
Yeah.
same, but the C70 still has that like lower noise floor as well that could possibly give it that advantage where, like you say, if you do the noise reduction on the shadows, you could save a little bit more. I don't know.
Wait, doesn't the C70 only have SD card slots though?
Yeah, it does. It's weird.
That's what I'm a little bit sus
It's
on.
weird.
Is like,
Yeah.
how are they getting raw out of it unless they're pulling back the raw a
It,
little bit and not giving you full?
it is compressed. It is like the raw light, but in all the testing that I've done between the different raws, that compression, it doesn't reduce the amount of like color depth that you have. What they're throwing away becomes more about motion compression. So if you have like noisy patterns, that compression becomes more visible, and you're going to get more things like JPEG artifacting, right? Like
Yeah.
little nodules. That's the type of compression that you'll be affected by, not the overall, which I care way less about. Because to me, it's like I want things to look amazing on a phone, and you see dynamic range on a phone. This is
Yeah.
my classic rant is when people give MKB HD a hard time for shooting on red, like people that buy super expensive cameras and shoot their YouTube videos, and they're like, but people just watch it on their phone. It's like, yeah, you can see the difference on a
Yeah.
phone. You don't think they're going to use when they're shooting a web campaign for Apple or BMW, and it's only going to be seen on YouTube. They don't use expensive cameras. You can
Yeah.
see the difference. Like
Because
that's
20
where
years down the road, that
yeah,
footage is still going to look great
yeah,
compared to us. If you have 10 stops, like we're trying to stretch it out and it doesn't look the
yeah,
same. It looks stretched. Like a
yeah.
lot of my footage looks stretched when I'm trying to match it to like my Komodo even.
Hmm.
So imagine like the Raptor, but yeah,
Someday.
I don't know. I think you're still gonna get the Raptor and you're still gonna get Da Vinci. Yeah. And when you do, I'll be here to say, told you so.
Oh man, yeah, I will. I can't wait for you to tell me told you so. But until then, I'm gonna keep enjoying your tutorials, Cam McKay. Where can people find you? Just say your things out loud in case they don't look at the show notes. They can find you on Instagram.
Just Instagram at Cam Mackey. It's Cam Mackey. For some reason, everyone says Cam McKay. I have no
I
idea why.
totally didn't ask you before we started. Oh, that's
Yeah.
embarrassing. At least I didn't get embarrassed until the end of the show.
No, literally everyone says McKay.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Or some
now we
people
know.
blend it. Like, every time I meet a model, it's Kamaki. Kamaki. I was like,
You got
it's
to put it
two.
into the intro of your videos. Then
Yeah.
it'll
Sorry.
work
Yeah.
single
I'm
time.
so bad at all that stuff. But yeah,
All right.
YouTube. I'm probably the smallest YouTuber that's been on your podcast. So thank you for thinking of me and let me come on here. That's
I don't think
amazing.
that'll-
And yeah, that's it really. Not on Twitter or nothing. I'm a grandpa. I'm grumpy.
well,
Yeah.
stay sane.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Sedona wants to say hi real quick before we leave. Come here.
Oh,
She's
good.
looking at me. Come
Last
here.
chance.
Come here.
Oh, there we go. We get a little cameo. Hopefully you can hear that through the mic.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for coming on, guys.